Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. And today we are going to talk about how you can check your oil pressure on your engine and what you should be seeing if you have a Datsun L series engine. But let me start off the episode by saying one thing. I do realize, not that I got any negative feedback on it so far, but I do realize that I'm starting to ramble a little bit about kind of irrelevant things in the beginning of episodes. I personally just hate it when other YouTubers, especially when I'm trying to learn something very specific, they just go on and on about their personal lives and stuff that, quite honestly, I don't really give a shit about. So I don't want to be hypocritical, so I will start providing timestamps in either the description section or the comment section so that you guys can skip right ahead to the meat of the discussion, the stuff that you really care about if you got here by like YouTube search. But the reason why I'm starting to give a little bit more comprehensive updates is because there are, at this point, a pretty significant number of people who are just following the build for the sake of following the build. You guys are watching the episodes in a series, and you guys very frequently have been asking, you know, what's going on, what's your plans, what's up next. So I love having you guys around. I love having people watch over my back and give me advice or ask questions that get me to think in a different direction. So I love you guys, or love is a strong word. I really appreciate you guys. So that's what I'm trying to do in the beginning of episodes now. And I realize I've already rambled on for 2 minutes. Look, so here's been what's going on now that we lost all of those task-specific people. So last week, sorry I wasn't able to provide a update or an episode last week. I did have a pretty good streak of uploading at least one video or one episode per week, and I broke that streak because I was really pretty busy with work. But obviously I'm not complaining because that's what enables me to do all of this, and I kind of like my job. That being said, I did not have a chance to work on the car very extensively, but here's the good news. I did schedule a dyno test for next week. So by next weekend, you guys should be able to see the dyno episode if all goes well. Last weekend, I didn't have a lot of time, but I did have time to go on a lengthy test drive. I really should stop calling it a test drive at this point because I'm just doing it for fun now. I went out for a 200-mile drive in which I drove the car super aggressively and I romped on it. I let my friends just abuse this thing, and it was a lot of fun. And the car, most importantly, handled all of that beautifully. The engine is just running really well, running better than ever before, at least since I've known the car. So I'm feeling pretty confident going into the dyno, and there's not that many things that we have to do. I mean, we would be fine going to the dyno tomorrow if we wanted to without doing anything else. But there are some things that I want to do. So really the last items on this list is checking the oil pressure, which again is not a must-do item because there's really nothing that I can do if the oil pressure is low. There's nothing that I can do at this point until next week. I'm certainly not gonna rip out the engine and try to rebuild another one in a few days. So, but we are going to check the oil pressure. We will also check and replace all the fluids. By all the fluids, I mean the coolant, the engine oil, transmission oil, differential oil, and those are the big four, I believe. So I did replace all of those fluids when I got the car, which was about 1,500 miles ago, and it's not time to replace any of those things just yet, but I do want to replace all of them just to see how those things are holding up. Obviously, we don't want to see coolant in the engine oil and engine oil in the coolant. We don't want to see metal flakes in the differential oil or the transmission oil. I did, flush out the brake fluid and the clutch fluid, so I don't think those things need to be really checked because there's nothing wrong with those. And that's pretty much it. I mean, visual check, I really haven't just concretely checked this off, but I've been just doing it every once in a while to check if there's any fresh fluid that's leaking out of the car. So there's some also things that I checked off of this list even though I didn't do it. Power balance, I don't think that's necessary at this point. Engine temp, the engine has a lot of problems, or had a lot of problems, but one problem it didn't ever have is overheating. And that was with driving in North Carolina in the summer with sitting in traffic for hours. So there's nothing going on with the engine temp. I think it's fine. But we'll just keep an eye on that, especially as we get closer to summer, and we'll probably have to pop back on the fan shrouds that I hate so much. And the pressure test. The pressure test is just testing the radiator cap so that we know that it's releasing the pressure buildup at a certain PSI. I'm not going to do that because I would do that if we were using like the original or a really old radiator cap, but I did replace that with a brand new one. I'm just going to go ahead and trust that it's fine. So those are all the things. These are not a engine tune-up list. These are all just various things that I need to get to. That is all the updates. And that was a lot of rambling this time. But let's talk about the engine oil pressure. So as always, let's talk about the basics first before we actually get to measuring the oil pressure. And I feel like I need to do this because there's a lot of misconceptions about what a low oil pressure means. And a lot of people equate the oil pressure with the general health of the engine, which is technically correct, but it's measuring something pretty specific. It is measuring the clearances between the crankshaft, which obviously rotates, and the various journals that are attached to the crankshaft. So the oil gets fed into the crankshaft and it gets distributed to the various journals. And if those journals have excessive clearance, you will have low oil pressure. So generally older engines have greater clearances as the engine gets worn, which is why you see a lower oil pressure for an engine that's been in service for a while as opposed to an engine that is brand new or rebuilt back to factory specs. So that's what it's measuring. And this is kind of what I meant by I feel a little silly checking the oil pressure now because there's really nothing that I can do if I see low oil pressure. There's nothing that I can do to address that before we get to the dyno next week because that would pretty much mean that the engine block needs a rebuild. So while the cylinder head in this, the cylinder head has been rebuilt, but I did not touch the block. So I've been just kind of relying on the factory oil pressure sending unit that sends information to the gauge inside. And of course, all the Zs have a oil pressure gauge in the cabin of the car, and I've been just kind of relying on that. One thing about those gauges is that it is very prone to failure or misreadings. And while if you see low or weird oil pressure, you shouldn't automatically assume that the gauge is bad, but you should also check the oil pressure with a mechanical gauge, which is something like this. I bought this oil or engine oil and transmission fluid pressure gauge. That's why there's two different gauges here. You really don't need to because I think they, all of the local auto parts stores, or most of them, will rent these things out for free. And this is a mechanical gauge. The stock fuel pressure sending unit, which I already have popped out right here. And if you guys watched the engine rebuilding series, you guys saw me remove this. So I already removed this, which threads into the block right here. Let me get a light. So this thing threads into the side of the block right here. Right now there's a gauge connected to it with a adapter. This thing threads in and it sends, I think, electrical signals. You can see the wire that's being tied here, so it's not a mechanical gauge. Eventually, even if you don't see anything weird, it's probably a good practice to borrow one of these mechanical gauges and check up on it just in case. Probably towards the closer to when you actually get the car than what I'm doing now after doing all of this work. So I would be pretty bummed if I see something odd in the oil pressure because I really don't feel like tearing out the block right now, even though I am working on an extra unit over there. So those are the basics of what oil pressure is. Now, what should you be seeing? This information turned out to be really elusive to find for some reason. Whenever some people say, or in the forums, people ask, hey, is this normal oil pressure? People just go right on to, hey, you should check with a mechanical gauge because the oil pressure sending unit is probably bad and it's just not helpful at all. So here's what I did find though. So generally, you should see in a healthy engine 7 to 10 psi's of oil pressure per 1,000 RPMs, which means that your oil pressure is going to change depending on how fast the engine is spinning. Now, at idle, this thing runs at 800. So at idle, what you should be seeing, or what I should be seeing is, if I'm doing my math right, anything from 5-ish to 8-ish psi's of pressure, and I don't expect to see anything over that. Now, don't freak out if you turn on the car and this gauge says 0 or something really low, because as the oil gets warmed up, your oil pressure will change as the car warms up. And I first thought that the oil pressure will start really high because the engine oil is thicker or less viscous when it's cold. But I think it's actually the opposite. I think it'll start really low and then move up to a stable point as the engine gets to its operating temperature. There's really nothing much to this. This is just a gauge with a couple of fittings, and this kit that I got, it comes with a lot of different fittings depending on what car you have, so I just picked the right one and just connected it in. That's all there was to that. And I think that's it. So obviously I have everything hooked up, so I'm gonna go inside and turn on the car and we'll see what happens with this gauge. By the way, we are about to start the car and see what our idle pressure is like. But it is 10 o'clock right now and I'm already pushing the limits of my neighborhood's tolerance for noise at this time, even by turning on this noisy engine. But so we will only check it at idle, which should settle really nicely at around 800 RPM as the engine gets to its operating temperature. But you should also check this while revving the engine, because like I said, you should be seeing 7 to 10 psi's of oil pressure for every 1,000 RPM. So you need to check at 3,000, you need to check at 6,000 and make sure that you have healthy oil pressure. I myself will be doing that tomorrow, and I will be once again just like zip tying this to the windshield or something like that to get a reading while I drive, but I'm not going to be able to do that tonight because I don't want pissed off neighbors. Cool. So as you guys saw, I was reading something in between 6 and 7 psi's, which is, good enough. Since we were idling exactly at 800 times 7 divided by 1,000, which is the bare minimum, is 5.6, I think. Yeah, so it's over 5.6, but it's not quite 8. But I'm happy with this because, by the way, I don't test things and then tell you guys how it went. Footage that you're seeing is really me seeing it for the first time as well. So these are kind of just like genuine reactions. So it's not perfect, but I didn't expect to be perfect because this is the original block that came with it, and God knows how many miles are on this thing. So I was just hoping that it's above the bare minimum, something to hold me over until, again, that engine is complete. 6 to 7 psi's of oil pressure at 800 RPM is just good enough for me. And we'll have to do a more comprehensive road test with this gauge. Everything looks good so far, so I will see you guys next time. The next episode might be just a quick update of miscellaneous items that I'm trying to do before the dyno. And by next weekend, like I said, you guys should be able to see a dyno update. And hopefully they let me film in there because I think it's going to be pretty interesting. All right, see you guys later.